we have Dr. Danielle Tomasello. She's a postdoctoral fellow at the Whitehead Institute for Biomedical Research. She utilizes human stem cells to model and study neurodevelopmental disorders. Her current focus is on mitochondrial and metabolic changes in the developing brain. She's also the founder of the nonprofit The Social Scientist, a virtual one-on-one mentorship initiative for STEM career guidance and advice. She completed her bachelor's degree in biology with a concentration in developmental biology and genetics from Penn State University, and received her PhD in neuroscience from University at Buffalo. Thank you for joining STEMmunity today, Danielle. Could you please start by sharing some insight into what you're doing at your current position?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to speak with you today. So I am a postdoc, as you said, and for those that don't know, a postdoc is essentially another stepping stone after you complete your PhD. So I am working in a lab where my PI is a professor at MIT. And he has his own research group. So I'm a part of his research group. But the goal of a postdoc is to become more independent. So like, for instance, I've gotten fellowships and my own funding to show that I'm like a more independent scientist. And essentially to kind of bridge where you want to go next. So the postdoc was a great way. I really wanted to get into stem cell research. So this was a great way for me to do it. And I am currently on like the academic market and the industry market. So I'm considering both options, which is what you can absolutely do after a postdoc. But there are definitely many avenues from, having a bachelor's, master's, PhD. So you don't necessarily need to do a postdoc. It's just one avenue that you can do. So my work, as you said, is concentrated more on mitochondria and metabolism in brain development. So I'm really interested in kind of what goes awry with neurodevelopmental disorders. And the approach that I have been taking is to utilize metabolism. So looking at all of these different molecules in these cells to kind of give me a starting point to understand what goes wrong. So for instance, the current work that I'm working on is called Rett syndrome. So this is a very severe syndrome that's associated with autism spectrum disorder. And what I found kind of using the metabolism approach is I found that energy metabolism was quite disrupted in a cell that's in the brain called an astrocyte. And so that's kind of the avenue that I've been interested in, is understanding how energy metabolism is disrupted. And that goes hand in hand with mitochondria and mitochondria function. So I'm really interested to see how we can kind of correct these things, what therapeutic avenues that we have.
Thank you for sharing that. Could you expand more about your journey to get where you are right now and sort of this focus on neurodevelopmental disorders?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to say I have a very broad background in science. The first research lab that I started in was at Penn State, and I would think I was a freshman, and I was just interested in research in general. So I asked my biology professor if I could kind of do some research in his lab. So I worked on looking at plants, just understanding mutations in plants. So that kind of got me interested in research. And then I worked in a couple of different labs where one lab was looking at just kind of pathogenicity, combining like bacteria or viruses or parasites in the natural world. So looking at like, if you were to look at a mouse outside, what kind of, what does it have as a host and what has invaded that species? And then I focused more on parasites. I worked with malaria. I also did an internship in a structural biology lab, but I ended up doing a PhD in neuroscience. So you can see how I kind of have a broad range. I honestly thought I worked as a technician on parasites, this one parasite called trypanosomes. And I was really interested in just parasitology. I thought microbiology was a really awesome field. But when I started my PhD program, I was in an integrated program, which I completely recommend if you are interested in grad school, that if there is an integrated program where there's more than one department, that's an option. That's actually a really great option because you have just more range and more labs that you can rotate in and see if that's a good fit for you. So I was in an integrated program. So I rotated in labs like in biochemistry and in pharmacology and neuroscience. And I ended up really liking the neuroscience lab. So it just completely went with what my interests were. And my PhD advisor was also very charismatic. So he was really good at making you interested in anything he did. He could get you interested in dirt. So that was like very helpful. And that's how I got into the neuroscience field. And then once I was there, I was just like, I absolutely love this field. We know absolutely so little about the brain. It's a really interesting field that I think we will always need studies in. And then I did my PhD working in pain sensation and mechanisms. And that was a really awesome project. I really enjoyed that field, but I kind of wanted to move away from that. And honestly, one particular reason was I was working with a mouse model, and I unfortunately had to have the mice endure pain to study the mechanisms of that. And it was really tough for me to do. It really wore me down. I felt very, very bad. So the pain field, it's a very interesting, very complex, awesome field, but I couldn't stay in it. So when I finished my PhD, I knew I wanted to do a postdoc. So I looked at a number of different postdocs in different types of labs. I mostly wanted to look at stem cell work, so that's kind of what I focused on. But I looked at labs for neurodegeneration, such as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. I looked at labs that focused on like axon repair. So like say you have injury and you want to look at like the repair mechanisms, that type of repair. And I ultimately decided that I really liked the neurodevelopment field. And that's how I ended up choosing my lab. So I'll just say that it's really good to be open-minded and just kind of follow your curiosity and what really your interests are.
Thank you for sharing that insight. So it seemed like you had a very like broad interest in science, and you discovered like you looked into pharmacology and then like moved into neuroscience amongst other like topics in this integrated program. Did you always know that you were interested in science and STEM growing up, or was that sort of later in your career?
Mm-hmm. I had always wanted to be a vet since I was 4, or as far back as I could remember. And in high school, I think around my freshman or sophomore year, I started to work in vet clinics. And so I worked in 2 different vet clinics. And even though I enjoyed my time there, I couldn't really see myself as a veterinarian. Like I couldn't really picture it. And there are a lot of good and bad things that go with being a veterinarian. And the bad things were a little hard for me to kind of stomach. So I went down the path of just doing a biology degree, which you can absolutely do. You do not have to do like specifically like a pre-med degree to go to medical school. You can do biology, covers so many bases. So it wasn't really until I started that first lab in research that I decided that's kind of the path I wanted to take. Because I entertained other ideas, like I considered being a chiropractor for a bit. But yeah, once I started research, I really enjoyed it. I really just liked the idea of being able to ask a question and kind of having the tools to try to answer that question. And as the tools and technology continue to develop, it gets easier and also more complex to answer these questions. And so, yeah, I really enjoy the research field.
Sorry, just one second. My computer is at 5%, so I'm just going to plug it in.
Of course.
Okay. Again, so sorry about that. So what does a typical day at your current position look like?
So I am in a pretty independent lab where my PI is not too involved with what I'm doing. So I do my own research and I lead that research. I don't currently, but I have had in the past master's students or undergraduate students that I would mentor. But like a typical day is I come in and I would say like half of my days on the computer. So either I'm analyzing data or working on a paper or working on a application, fellowship. And then the second half of my day, it goes back to my experiments. So either setting up experiments or actually performing the experiments. A lot of my time is in what's called a biosafety hood. So this is a enclosed area that kind of prevents contamination from the outside world. And this is how we look at our cells. And so I spend a lot of time working on those cells, taking the human stem cells and making them into the cell type of interest that I would like to study. And so sometimes I'm in the hood, or other times I'm doing work at my bench. So I'm doing I do a lot of like biochemistry work. And a lot of times I'm using other equipment and I'm going elsewhere. But I would say it's pretty much 50-50. So usually when you start out as a PhD student, as a master's student, postdoc, you are spending 100% of your time pretty much like at your computer, researching the field, trying to get an idea of what you would like to study. And then you start to do more bench work. So I'm at the much later stage where I'm trying to wrap everything up. So honestly, a lot of my time is spent on my computer writing papers and all of those things.
So you mentioned like a lot more of your work is independent in terms of like leading these studies, your research, and writing these papers. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Do you enjoy that about your profession, or what are the sort of things that you like to do or like about what you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So each lab will be a little bit different. It honestly depends on your mentor. Some mentors are way more involved. Like for instance, my mentor from my PhD, I saw him every single day. He would just kind of walk around the lab, ask what you're doing, look at the data, constantly talk to you. So I was constantly talking to him. My PI is much more hands-off right now, and I honestly very rarely talk to him. But we have like group meetings every week. And if I need to, like he definitely is available if I need to talk to him. But I just I spend a lot of my time more speaking with my coworkers, like other postdocs in the lab, kind of bouncing ideas or troubleshooting things. Than I did more in my PhD. I would more speak to my advisor about those types of things. So yes, you definitely learn how to multitask, troubleshoot, be more independent, where I just don't necessarily need my advisor. But if I was a PhD student in the lab, that would be much different. I would actively seek out more help from him.
So you've mentioned that like your PhD advisor like played a huge role in sort of pushing you towards this integrated program. Am I right about that? Or
Opposite. So I came into a integrated program and then chose his lab.
okay. What and he checked in with you sort of every single day when he was in the lab. Do you think that mentorship and that sort of support network played a significant role in your career and sort of choosing the path that you're on right now?
So I'm not sure if his like mentorship type affected me too much. I would say that I overall had a really great experience with him, and he was a great mentor, very intelligent, very enthusiastic. Um, but I don't think that his mentorship style impacted me in any way.
Mhm.
But there definitely are circumstances where students will have like a not great mentor, and that can kind of dissuade them from continuing in the field. So that unfortunately probably will never go away. And it's really good to have people that you can lean on and talk to. So it's always good to know other PIs that you can speak to. And if it really is that bad of a situation, figuring out what your next steps are. But I think overall it made, whether or not he was a good mentor or not, I think I still would have continued to do a postdoc.
So you're the founder of the Social Network, and that's one-on-one mentoring on like career guidance and advice for like your STEM career. What sort of prompted you to create that platform?
Yeah. So I started the Social Scientist back in 2018, and it stemmed from my frustration with not being able to connect with people in a new field that I was entering and kind of feeling lost. So I kind of thought back to my career trajectory and where I was at that time. So I was a newer postdoc, and I thought about all of the people that helped me along the way to get to where I was, and how I wished those people were in my new field. Um, and from that kind of started the idea of, well, I had such a great interaction with all of these people that have helped my career. I would hope that other people could talk to them too. And that's how it started. I essentially just had this idea. I reached out to friends and former mentors that I thought kind of fit that idea of an enthusiastic mentor that is willing to share their time to um, spend with mentees. And that's how it started. So it was a kind of a small group of people. And I actually don't recruit people for the social scientists. I have them submit a form, and then I determine if they're a good fit or not. And from there, it's just it's been great. Honestly, we have, I think, over 150 mentors at this point, from all fields in STEM. So everything from uh, technology and biotechnology, engineering. And it's really interesting to see kind of the crosstalk of people's trajectory of, this is the career path I took, and this is kind of where I ended up. And we have had hundreds of mentees, and it has just been so amazing to speak with them and see how we've been helping. A lot of the mentor-mentee interactions continue. Like, I have a few mentees that I check in with regularly, and it's been really rewarding. I'm really happy with how it kind of turned out from just a idea that I had one day.
Like, congratulations, that's amazing. So do you facilitate these mentor-mentee interactions, or is it sort of like you enter the platform, you evaluate whether they're a good fit, and from there they can connect together and
Mhm.
talk
So
together? Mhm.
yeah. So the one thing that I did not like, when looking at other platforms that were similar, was that they would pair you.
Mhm.
And I wanted the opposite. I wanted the mentee to choose what mentors they liked. And mentees usually, when they are looking for mentors, they usually tend to reach out to between 2 and 10 mentors at one time. So I really like that they can see all of the different fields that we have and speak to mentors based on their interests. So they reach out. The mentors, like I said, they fill out an application where I ask a couple of questions to make sure that they are a good fit, but also just the fact that they are applying to become a mentor, like it also ensures that they are actually interested in this endeavor. So there's no limit to how many mentors you can have. You can absolutely reach out to every single mentor on the site. And then it's the conversations happen organically. It's up to the mentor mentee how they would like to chat, like if it's just over the phone or Zoom or just an email back and forth. And then honestly, once the site was built, it kind of runs itself. So I get CC'd on the interactions, like I know when a mentee reaches out to a mentor, and then I'll check in with that mentee a couple of months later just to make sure they had a good interaction. But the setup worked out very well because even if I'm away, the site is still kind of running by itself.
So this started sort of like when you entered new fields and felt frustration that there wasn't much support into that like field, or sort of, is that correct? Yeah. And
Yes, being in the neurodevelopment field, which was completely new to me. And a postdoc is a lot different from a PhD because during your PhD, you come in as a cohort. So you have the other students and you definitely work with those other students and you know what every student is doing in every other lab and you can always talk to them. It's not really like that as a postdoc. You can be very isolated. And I felt like it was hard for me to make good connections and understand like directions that I could take. So it did kind of stem from my frustration of like trying to have good mentors kind of moving forward in my postdoc career.
so the mentors that are available on your platform are, do they provide assistance with giving more of an insight into their particular field? What sort of, what do they offer to their mentees, basically?
So it is whatever conversation that you would like to have is what they're willing to have. The only thing that I say that we don't do is we're not a job board. So it's not like you can ask someone for a position at their company or something. But a lot of most of the mentees that we have are students. And a lot of them are saying, I'm really interested in this field. Could you tell me about your field and how you got to where you are? So that's mostly how interactions kind of start. I have had a lot of mentees where I offer to like look at their personal statement or applications to kind of help guide them in that direction too. So a lot of mentors will help assist in that aspect also.
During the the application process, when you're going through different applicants for mentors, what are
Mhm.
the sort of criteria that you keep in mind to choose a
I look for honest interest in the platform. I want to know that they understand what the goal is,
mentor?
to provide like enthusiastic mentorship and to it essentially to the entire public too. So this is like freely available to anyone across the world, and we have mentors and mentees from absolutely every single continent, but in a lot of countries too. So it's I'm looking for like an honest answers with I have 3 questions on the form that you fill out. So I'm looking for honest answers and for them to understand what the goal is.
I know during our email communication, you mentioned that 70% of your mentors are female and non-binary. Was that something you kept in mind, the diversity of your platform when like choosing mentors or sort of highlighting different people to reach out to?
So I'll say that I'm very happy that we have such a great group of females or non-binary, but that is completely from them. So because I'm not choosing the mentors, these are the people who actively want to be a part. And I would say that females in general do go above and beyond for a lot of careers in STEM where they want to be involved in aspects like these. So I'm not surprised at all that it turned out that there are more females that are our mentorship group. I'm very happy for that, and I'm happy to support their careers too.
Thank you. Could you expand more upon your journey as a woman in STEM? Were there any instances in your career where you felt like you weren't well supported because of your identity?
I would say overall, I have not undergone too much discrimination. I would say that there have been instances where I felt that I was underestimated or looked down upon. And I felt like there were times that I had to kind of prove myself. But I would say overall, I have not endured too much discrimination as a female. And I think that also just completely depends on the environment you're in.
Mhm.
I have like one really amazing mentor from when I was a technician. So she has been like just an amazing guiding light for my career. And I know that she has undergone a lot of discrimination during her time. And I have plenty of friends that have undergone discrimination. And it is really hard to hear. Think aspects such as, in a group meeting, if you speak up, it's actually, others aren't listening to you, or someone will repeat exactly what you said. And you're like, well, I just said that. Yeah, there are definitely instances, and it's really frustrating, but the best thing that we can do is support one another. So like, for instance, if you were to see that happen in a group setting, you can say, oh, no, wait, so and so, she just said that, and I agree with that. You kind of need to give the extra time to like take a step back and see if that is happening in the setting that you're in,
Mhm.
and see like what you can do to support it.
Do you think there are steps that institutions and organizations can make their environments more inclusive and sort of dismantle the double standards that are placed upon women in STEM?
Yeah, so it's honestly having more females and diversity, underrepresented minorities in the field. And I think over the last couple of years, the STEM field has gotten better, or at least the science field has gotten better about being inclusive, but we are so far away from optimal environment. And honestly, a sad thing in science is that a lot of old white men will just not retire. They they just continue. They continue, and they aren't leaving those open positions for new professors. And it is very, very difficult to become a professor at like a research institute. And there's only a handful of positions. It's very competitive. So it's having more open positions, having kind of older generations retire is honestly necessary. But I think new hiring process, people had been much more mindful of it.
Mhm.
So I feel like we are heading in the right direction. There are definitely institutions that have diversity training, which I think is great. Um, and honestly, just being open about things in your lab is really important. But I think, like I said, I think we're heading in the right direction. We just need more time.
Thank you for sharing that. I was wondering, if you could give some advice to your younger self, what would that be and why? And then following that, if you have any advice for the viewers watching this and sort of the young girls trying to find their career in STEM, what would you say to
Hmm, that's a great question. I would say that uh, don't be to like a younger self,
them?
don't be so hard on myself, and to just know that my persistence does pay off. So you don't need to be a straight A student, valedictorian to be in science and in research. You do have to be very hardworking, and that persistence will pay off one day. So I would say that that's important to know, that all of my work does eventually pay off. Like, I'm very happy with where I am today, I'll say. And for those that are interested in STEM, it's a tough field. I'm not gonna lie, science is a very tough field. It's still very competitive. It's very hard because in the US, we rely on the government to give us funding. And it's just hard. It's a hard field. But if you love research, this is a great field to be in. There is no other field where you can honestly just ask questions about biology and how things are done and how things are working, and then address it. So it's a really great field. There are just some parts of it which I hope will overall get better over time. And having a great mentor is very important for that. And so I would absolutely encourage everyone to reach out to mentors on the social scientist, and to understand that failure happens to absolutely everyone. So all of those people, those Nobel Prize laureates, they failed hundreds, thousands of times, and they just don't talk about it. So know that failure is absolutely a necessary process in science. Sometimes what you think will happen, it doesn't happen, and you have to pivot. And so being resilient is very important. But be okay with failing. It's absolutely okay. And it's also absolutely okay to kind of pivot and start fresh and figure out what's best for you, because your mental health is the most important thing. So don't let people bring you down.
Thank you so much for that advice. Before we end, I have one last question, sort of related to our initiative and our goal for this project about highlighting and increasing visibility of women in STEM. How do you think storytelling and sharing personal experiences can benefit and inspire future generations of women in STEM?
I think storytelling just gives you a more personal aspect of how people have their career trajectory in STEM. And like I said, people don't talk about their failures. So I can tell you, I failed many times. I was in a master's program at one point, and I failed my preliminary exam, and I thought things were over for me. But then I ended up pivoting, joined that PhD program, got into the lab that I ended up loving. And it was honestly great. I'm honestly happy that it happened, because it wasn't the best environment for me also. So I think that seeing everyone's story gives you a more organic idea of how you can perceive your career path and your ideas that you want to do. So I think I think what you're doing is amazing, and it will help many generations of females, and hopefully their interests in the STEM field.
Thank you so much.